Hello and a very warm welcome to this episode of the Ideas Factory. I'm Naghma. Joining me is Professor Pant. And on this episode of the Ideas Factory, an unsuccessful assassination bid on former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan. What does it mean for Pakistan's politics? What does it mean for Imran Khan and the army, or Imran Khan versus the Pakistani army? We will also look at Rishi Sunak's term as the British Prime Minister and the challenges that he now faces, and what can he do really to, bring Britain out of the turbulent economic crisis that is facing Britain. We will also look at the US midterm elections and, of course, Xi Jinping's comeback and his new cabinet. All that on this episode of the Ideas Factory. So, Harsh, I would like to begin by looking at what has happened in China. Xi Jinping has come back very strongly. He has reiterated, or rather the 20th Congress reiterated, that he is the center of Chinese power and no one will dare challenge him. It is being said that he has brought in such people in the cabinet who can never challenge him, and all those who had any kind of political impact have been kept out. So he has left no room really for any kind of political challenge. How do you look at this centralization of power?
It is quite extraordinary, Naghma. I think of course, it's a precedent-defying third term for him. And the way he laid out the vision for China and his third term was also, that we talked about in the last episode, was quite expansive in terms, and very, very aggressive, very assertive of Chinese interests, and very clear in terms of where he wants to take China. But I think what the way he unveiled his so-called cabinet, the Politburo members, is another story, because that tells you how the domestic politics and the domestic political landscape in China is also changing around Xi Jinping and with Xi Jinping. We have had, for a long time, the sense that Deng Xiaoping had laid out this sense of collective leadership, that no one person should become too powerful. This was good, according to Deng, at that particular point in time. That was seen as good for the Communist Party, that was seen as good for China, and I think that was seen as in the larger interest of Chinese people. Now Xi has overturned a lot of those maxims. He has now gone back to the era of Mao, which incredibly, was one of the most brutal personalities of the 20th century. So he's replicating himself, the cult of personality that he's building around, that she is building around himself, according to what he thinks, what is required at this juncture. But it reminds a lot of people with what Mao had achieved and was trying to achieve, with all the consequences for China and for the world. So I think this is definitely an inflection point in the way Chinese domestic politics is evolving. It will have great consequences for domestic politics. It will have great consequences for global politics. It will have great consequences for Chinese neighbors. So the more centralization there is, the more totalitarian the government becomes in China, the leadership becomes in China, the Communist Party becomes in China. I think the ability of the rest of the world to communicate reduces, the ability of the world to engage reduces, and the ability of the world to shape China in a more liberal way also reduces. And I think that is what we have witnessed over the last decade. But now going forward, as he has packed his team with his yes men, and of course, there are no women anywhere to be seen this time.
Of course, and that's also probably the first time in 25 years.
Extraordinary, I think, yes, that you would have, 1.3 billion people and hardly a woman there as their representative. But of course, Chinese Communist Party is not known to be representative, and they don't believe in representation. If they were believing in that, it would be a very different political party. But I think the sense that you can govern a country of this size with a clique, with a small group of people who are beholden to you, also brings with it, some very significant challenges. Now, one can assume that, from his perspective, this is about driving, pushing through his agenda much more forcefully in a much more focused manner, and therefore delivering the results by 2049 that he had envisioned. China becoming the leading power, the main player on the global stage, and also achieving the so-called Chinese vision. But I think it creates complexities, because if the experimentation goes awry, then there are problems within China, and those problems will create its own consequences for the world. And centralization of this kind, we have seen through history, especially in autocracies, never leads to good results. Now, either she is extraordinarily capable, or he is trying to defy some very significant odds. But I think this is what his Politburo membership at the moment reveals: an extraordinary centralization, and therefore the world, and particularly the neighbors, should be watching very, very carefully how the policies evolve.
Absolutely, like you said, he has categorically expelled all the party veterans. He's kept them out, and he's gotten people who are his yes men. And apparently, a team of 6 core members are the ones who form this cabinet, and more and more centralization there we are looking at. We shift to the US. US is facing a midterm election that's on November 8th. And, of course, Biden and Obama are all pitching for how people should vote to save democracy. But what's at stake here, Harsh, for the Democrats? Will the US midterm elections be a game changer? What's at stake for the Democrats here, and how can it really alter the power game? What does it mean for the Republicans? Will they actually gain more control over the Senate? So how do we look at this, and what kind of changes can it bring around in US domestic politics and the power game there?
I think this may turn out to be one of the most consequential midterm elections, because traditionally we have seen midterm elections where the ruling party generally loses. And we have seen, if you go back to Obama, there was a major resurgence of the Republicans in the midterms. But I think this one is particularly serious, because it hinges on the results of this midterm, hinges the future productivity of Biden presidency. I think the prediction is, the opinion polls are suggesting that it's going to be very, very close. In fact, no one is questioning that the House of Congress will go to the Republicans. The debate is about the scale of their victory there, and then in the Senate, the debate is, or the discussion is around, how will the balance tilt? Increasingly, you have those who observe American politics giving it to the Republicans again. So I think it is going to be very significant, because with Republicans in charge, you can see the entire dynamic changing in American politics. The focus of both political parties are on different sets of issues. And I think for Mr. Biden, this is a particular dilemma, because he has not been very popular from the very beginning. If you look at his popularity ratings, they have been going down ever since his election after a few months. And it looked for a brief period in the summer that Democrats might not do that badly, that Democrats might again gain because of the Supreme Court ruling on abortion rights, which galvanized a lot of the politics on the left. But I think that has dissipated now under the economic stress, under this idea that crime is surging. There is a lot of concern about immigration. So I think by and large, those issues on which Republicans are stronger, those issues are now galvanizing or mobilizing the electorate. And that's not good news for the Democrats. And if that continues to hold on the election day, then I think we can see the entire appending of the Biden agenda, and Mr. Biden will have a very difficult time over the next 2 years. But also, I think question marks will flags will be raised whether he's a viable candidate for the next presidency. So we have a very interesting space here, which is going to be watched very, very carefully, because Mr. Trump is also in the fray. Many of his candidates are in the fray.
Yes.
He's supporting a lot of those candidates, and if they do well, then it's very clear that he's going to come out and say that he's going to be part of the 2024 cycle, and that's again going to bring America back to that old debate about Trumpism, and where the Republican Party is headed. So I think it has consequences for the Democrats, for their governance agenda. It will have consequences for the Republican Party and the way Republican Party will evolve from here. If Mr. Trump's candidates do win, then I think it will expose the fundamental vulnerabilities within the Republican Party as well. That Republicans, instead of moving to the center, are also moving to the right, and that will have implications for U.S. domestic politics. So I think there is. Perhaps one of the most significant elections we have seen in a generation, and as far as America is concerned, and therefore there is so much interest in what is going to happen, and we would know very, very soon what the results would be.
Also, because probably America is going through a bad time in terms of the inflation and
Very serious.
many other issues that are there. So the whole fight is about the House of Representatives, where the Republicans do not have a majority now, but they may come back with a higher number now. That's what it is said, because the Senate, they are basically, we have to see where does it tilt. Right now it's in perfect equilibrium, but where does it tilt? But the whole fight is about the House of Representatives, and like you said, of course, the future course of action for President Biden. UK has a new prime minister, and there's a lot of celebration and jubilation here in India that we've seen, but he faces difficult times ahead. And UK also is going through one of the worst times in terms of its economy. What are the kind of challenges that Rishi Sunak faces, and how after very long, probably can we expect that there'll be some kind of stability in UK's politics?
Well, I think, Naghma, that's essentially what Mr. Sunak's presidency will be about, whether he can provide some semblance of a stability to a very, very turbulent phase in British politics. So many prime ministers have come and so many prime ministers have gone. The problems that the Britons are facing remain where they were. And I don't think the governance has moved. And therefore, for a lot of the Tories, the Conservatives, Rishi Sunak was seen as the right choice because of his economic credentials, because he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and that he would some of his ideas that actually led him not winning the contest vis-a-vis Liz Truss actually allowed him later on to gain the confidence of the Conservatives and the members of Parliament, because he's seen as someone who can manage these challenges much better than any other player on the Conservative side at this point. But I think that the challenges are enormous. The challenges, as we know, Britain is going through a very, very difficult phase. The post-Brexit economic direction has not been ascertained as of yet. Again, cost of living crisis, inflation, economic crises on multiple fronts continue to beckon. This has been a very serious summer for them, and this is going to be a very difficult winter. And unless Mr. Sunak is able to convince a large majority of the country that Conservatives can govern and govern with an effective agenda, we have seen a resurgence of the Labour Party. So I think for him, the challenge is domestic, which is political in nature. He has to establish himself as a leader of the Conservatives across the union. He has to establish himself as a credible economic manager, and he has to establish himself as a global leader at a time when Britain is trying to establish a post-Brexit foreign policy. So enormous challenges for him, and given the economic woes that Britain is passing through, primarily his focus would be domestic. But for India, as we know, one of the issues is the FTA that we are negotiating, which was supposed to have been negotiated by Diwali, and we have seen that has fallen through. And although the indications are that the negotiations continue, but with this kind of a political turbulence, any ambitious foreign policy agenda will have to wait, because first Rishi Sunak will have to establish himself, consolidate his power, and then maybe make a move towards this very, very contentious in some ways agreement and we know the challenges there, including immigration. But I think his challenge is twofold: to convince the conservatives that he's serious about their concerns, and to convince India that he's serious about what India wants out of this FTA.
Absolutely, and probably here Indians have to understand that it is Britain's prime minister and it's British and not that the Indian has gone there, and probably he has to look after India's interests first. The kind of jubilation and celebration that we saw here, but everywhere it's all about economy and the bad economy that the countries are facing, and same with Brazil. Now the re-election for the third time of President Lula. What will he be able to pull Brazil out of the poverty that Brazil is facing? That's the question. And what does his re-election, a third time, the leftist leader's re-election, tell? And I mean, if it has any implication for Brazil-India relations.
Well, I don't think so. It has particularly, any significant implications either way. I think India and Brazil relations have been growing gradually, and they will continue to evolve, whoever is the president of Brazil. Given that our interests in terms of, as emerging powers, as major global regional players, India in the Indo-Pacific, Brazil in the Americas, converges at a number of levels as far as global multilateral issues are concerned. But I think where what Lula's visit, I think, would reassure, where it would reassure a lot of people, would be on the environmental front, because his predecessor, Mr. Bolsonaro, had taken a particularly negative approach to environmental preservation in the Amazon rainforests, and there he was seen as someone who was not adhering to the global norms on environmental issues, and he was seen as an outlier. So there is, I think, there's some relief in the when it comes to the environmental issues, and that Mr. Lula would continue to be a bit more open-minded and a bit more responsible towards this very, very important issue for Brazil and for the rest of the world. But I think where what we have also seen is that Brazil has also become highly polarized. This was when it all started. It looked that Mr. Lula would win very easily. But he did not win very easily. He had to go to the second round, and even the final results were only 1.5% difference between the two candidates. So it's a very polarized country at the moment, and people. So first thing he'll have to do is to unite that country, because a lot of the people who have supported Mr. Bolsonaro do not look at Mr. Lula as a credible candidate. They view him as a thief. All kinds of terms have been used against him, and he also responded in kind against Mr. Bolsonaro. It was a particularly divisive campaign. So I think the first challenge is to unite the country, and then, of course, as you said, economic relations, economic problems are at front and center. Now his record is very good. When he managed to reduce poverty in Brazil significantly during his first term. But I think now the equations are different. The world is still grappling with the post-pandemic economic environment. The global economic situation is particularly vulnerable. Countries have to find resources and resilience from within rather than from without, which used to happen rather than from the external space that used to happen in the past. So I think it would be Lula's response would be contingent on whether he finds enough resilience within the Brazilian economy to move forward in a manner that allows for a reduction of poverty, which is a major issue, and which is one of the main reasons why a lot of people have voted for him to bring the economy back on track.
Of course, Pakistan then. Lastly, Pakistan, which never fails to surprise. I mean, just a few we were all really shocked to hear, thankfully, an unsuccessful assassination bid on former Prime Minister Imran Khan while he was carrying on with his Haqiqi Azadi March. And this happening in the Punjab province, he survived, but the way he has named some important people in Pakistan behind this assassination bid in the FIR, it clearly it has drawn the battle line between Imran Khan and the army. It was also said that he was probably also attacking the army, trying to divide the army. He's accused the current Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif for masterminding this entire assassination attempt. He has named a senior ISI general. He's also named the Interior Minister Of course, they are saying that it is all baseless. But what does it really mean for Imran Khan politically? What does it mean for Pakistani politics? And we've also seen that he's a very popular leader. So does that also enhance his popularity in terms of being a mass leader? I mean, look at the recent some of the election results that have come out. So does he really his whole popularity gain momentum after this? And I mean, a Pakistani army, the all powerful army, and this popular leader now. So it's one versus the other.
Yes, I think the very significant battle lines being drawn, and I think between two very, very important stakeholders. And on the one hand, you have Mr. Khan, who continues to be one of the most popular politicians in Pakistan that we have seen in recent times. He's a genuine mass leader, and in some ways, his ineffectiveness as the prime minister only seems to have consolidated his popularity post his prime ministership. So I think in some ways there is, after a long time, we are witnessing this kind of mass movement in favor of a politician. People are thronging his rallies, people are joining his marches. And what he says also is something that is being taken very seriously by people. He's able to communicate very effectively to people. And that, I think, has put him squarely against the army, which is, again, we know, one of the most important institution in the country. But we have not seen any other politician so far damaging the army the way Imran Khan is damaging army's credibility, bit by bit, drop by drop, day after day, leveling allegations, making army almost a butt of ridicule, which has not happened in Pakistan, for a very long time. So I think, in some ways, this assassination attempt enhances his credibility as a leader who has come out of this crisis, and despite that, he's moving along. He's challenging the army. He's not afraid. He's willing to take on the most important group in the country, and I think that enhances his credibility as a mass leader, as a leader who has who is genuinely, who in some ways genuinely represents the people. So I think it's going to be a very, very interesting contest between him and the army, and I think it's a question of who blinks first, because army is really under pressure, and we have seen army coming out, ISI coming out and having press conferences, including that press conference on the journalist who was killed abroad. So I think there are multiple issues on which army is under pressure at this point, and it's very evident, and we have not seen that kind of Pakistani army and being under so much pressure. So it is certainly a politically interesting time in Pakistan, but I think it is also very dangerous, because when you have such an important institution like the army pushed to a corner, then you never know what kind of recourse they might take, and what kind of avenues they might find to retaliate. And I think so. Sure. But one thing is sure, that we are looking at a lot of turbulence over the near future. I don't see this ending well. I don't see this resolving anytime soon. And I don't see that in Pakistan a political center which can hold, because you have these tendencies which continue to divide Pakistan today, much like they have divided in the past. Their faces might be different, but I think the tendencies are the same.
Absolutely. And already turbulent Pakistan's political atmosphere is further disturbed after this assassination bid. And interestingly, it has increased Imran Khan's popularity and credibility. And also Imran Khan has managed to increase the pressure on the all-powerful Pakistani army, which is probably happening in a very long time. So those are very interesting times for Pakistan's democracy too. Thank you so much, Harsh, for that analysis. And that's it from us on this episode of The Ideas Factory.
Thank you.